While you're playing Guitar Hero, as you hit notes, you get points. But how does score calculation actually work beyond number goes up? Why do similar looking notes sometimes give you a different number of points? In this video, join me on this deep dive into scoring, as I plan to show you how scoring actually works and how it's not always exactly how it seems. Plus, I'll show you how this deep dive led to an update to one of our favorite tools. Stay tuned for that announcement later on. Please note that this video specifically covers the Neversoft Guitar Hero games on the guitar instrument and bass. All games work pretty similarly, but they're different enough that not everything here would apply to the Harmonix Guitar Hero games. Before going into how scoring works, I need to cover some basic things about how computers store values. For the purposes of this video, all you would need to know about are integers and floating point values, also known as floats. Integers are whole numbers and cannot contain decimals. Your score throughout the song is stored as an integer, for example. Floats are numbers that can contain decimal points. I won't go into detail as to how those work, but just know that during gameplay, the game uses floats internally to calculate points while hitting sustains. Before talking about how much a note is worth, I first want to talk about your multiplier. As you hit notes, you'll notice that you start receiving a multiplier. When hitting your 10th note in a row, your points start doubling. Your 20th note will get you a 3 times multiplier, and your 30th note will quadruple every note from that point on until you miss. A 4 times multiplier is the highest multiplier you can receive without star power. Any point value in the rest of this video will be based on a 1-time multiplier to keep everything simple, unless noted otherwise. A single note that gets hit is worth 50 points. If a note is a chord, meaning 2 or more notes played at the same time, you get 50 points for every note in the chord. This means that a 2-note chord is worth 100 points, 3-note chords are 150, and so on. This number is then multiplied by your multiplier, so the score can add up quickly if a song contains many chords. For sustains, the game defines a base sustain length when starting a song. This length differs per game. For Guitar Hero 3 until Smash hits, this value is 50% of the difference between the first and second beat line times. In a chart file exists an array called fretbars. This is a list of integers that tells the game when to display a line on the fretboard. The game will take the second value in this list, which is the second line, and subtracts it from the first entry. In Guitar Hero Van Halen, the threshold can be set on a per-song basis, but by default is 50% as well. Some songs, like Little Guitars, use a threshold of 20%. More on this later, though. In Guitar Hero 5 and up, they can no longer be set per song, and the threshold was lowered to 45% the distance. When a note has a length larger than the base sustain length, the game turns this note into a sustain and it gets a tail behind it. After hitting the note, if you keep holding down the fret, more points than just the base 50 points are accumulated until the sustain ends or is dropped. The basic calculation is that for every beat the sustain is active, you accumulate 25 points. The game handles complex math behind the scenes to figure out exactly how many beats long each sustain is, even if it stretches across multiple measures. But the important thing is that you get 25 points for each beat. As sustains use floats to calculate its value, the total points will get rounded once the sustain ends and is added to your score. The points earned from holding down sustains are called ticks. Every beat gives you 25 points if a sustain lasts that long. If you take the distance between 2 beats and split it into 25 sections, these sections represent when the game gives players points from ticks. Since 1/25th of a beat is quite small, it's not uncommon to receive more than one tick within a single frame at higher tempos. Side note, there is an exception on the PlayStation 2. There appears to be a difference in calculating the value of sustains on PS2 versions of the games. Notably, the PlayStation 2 doesn't calculate some sustains properly, leading to missing ticks. This can be seen in songs like Stricken, where this sustain in Chorus 2 gives you 1 tick fewer, in this case 4 points less due to being under star power. This happens 3 times in the song, leading to 12 fewer maximum points compared to 360, PS3, and Wii versions of the game. It appears that the PS2 hardware itself is calculating numbers in a way not intended by the developers. While we're not exactly sure why this happens on a hardware level, all these sustains do end up being worth exactly 12.5 points when calculating their lengths. The PS2 rounds this down to 12 points, while the 360, PS3, and Wii round this number up to 13. The funny thing is that as of today, this glitch does not happen when emulating the game. Now going back to how ticks are delivered, there's also a quirk in the game where it does not give you anything less than 2 ticks at a time. Using the last sustain in My Name is Jonas as an example, it is set to 25 beats per minute or 2,354 milliseconds per beat. This means every tick is about 94 milliseconds apart or about 6 frames. However, you gain 2 ticks about every 12 frames instead, even though the tempo is slow enough to view each tick individually as the frames are generated. Using Raining Blood as a faster tempo example, the first note will give you 2 ticks every frame, but sometimes it gives 3 before going back to giving you 2. This is because the tempo of the song at the beginning is about 155 beats per minute, which correlates to beat lines about 390 milliseconds apart. 390 divided by 25 is 15.6 milliseconds per tick, which is less than 1 frame. So the game gives you 2 points the first frame the sustain is active, none the next, and then 2 again. Sometimes it'll give you 3 points on a frame due to 3 ticks fitting in 2 frames. In Van Halen, if a song's sustain threshold was changed, it only affected if the tail would show up. If a sustain's length fell in between the manually set value and the default 50%, a tail would show up in-game, but it would not give any additional points. And finally, Warriors of Rock features a phenomenon known as slow ticks. As the name implies, ticks are generated slower in certain circumstances, and the remainder of the points are earned when the sustain finishes. It appears that when you first start the game, ticks are generated super slowly, and you get the total value of the sustain as a burst similar to Guitar Hero 3, explained shortly. However, as time goes on, ticks will generate at the speed of previous games. Slow ticks can be used to get more points from the burst at the end while under star power. In Guitar Hero 3 and Aerosmith, the above stands true, but you get a burst of points if you hit the sustain in full. The reason for this is because the game will shorten all sustains by half the base sustain length, but still uses the full length of the sustain for calculating a sustain's point value. So what happens is when hitting the note, points will start accumulating, and when finishing the sustain, you get the point difference between the sustain's value and what you've accumulated in one swoop. You can slightly manipulate how many points you get in a tick burst by hitting the note early or late. In Guitar Hero 3 and Guitar Hero Aerosmith, you start receiving points once the note's time is passed. The strategy of hitting a sustained note late is useful in point squeezing, using time mechanics to manipulate star power activations to give more points, as you can activate star power to double the points received from a burst. In addition, if the 9th, 19th, or 29th note is a sustain, meaning the next note will flip the multiplier, and the next note immediately precedes that sustain and is the same color, the tick burst can actually use that new multiplier to get you even more precious points for min-maxing. This can be seen in songs like Mississippi Queen, where this yellow sustain is the 29th note, and the next note is another yellow. In this side-by-side, you can see both videos hitting the first yellow late and the second yellow early. They get the 200 points with the 4x multiplier, and the tick burst is given under this new multiplier as well. You can also see here that because Bjorn SH hit their note slightly later and saved up more ticks to be burst, they get 4 more points compared to Moose. In Guitar Hero World Tour and later, the game doesn't really keep track of when you hit the note as it relates to score you earn from ticks. You start earning them as soon as you hit the note. How this can be exploited is explained later when we talk about extended sustains. Because these games don't normally shorten sustains a lot, players find that it's actually more frustrating to hit sustains in these games if there are many sustained notes in quick succession. The game expects you to hold all sustain to their fullest in order to receive all the points from a sustain. You'll know you did not receive the full amount of points if, when hitting the next note, you see a small grayed out sustain past the strike line, representing the points not received. The only way to guarantee getting all the notes is to hold the note equal to or longer than the length of the sustain. This poses another problem though, as it means if you aren't playing frame perfect and there are too many sustained notes, you'll eventually run out of time in the game's timing window, leading to situations where you drop ticks. In My Place by Coldplay in Guitar Hero 5 is notorious for this. Earlier, I mentioned star power, so what exactly is it? Star power is a game resource you can use to temporarily double your points. While playing, you'll see some notes become star-shaped. If you hit all these star-shaped notes in a row, you will start filling up a meter, and once that reaches 50%, it can be activated to double your points for a short time. The meter drains at 12.5% per measure. Since it's based on measures in a song, the length of it can change per song depending on what time signature a song is in. Don't worry if you don't know what that means, as it involves music theory. All you need to know is time signatures change how long a measure lasts, and that directly affects the rate star power drains at. Instead, I'll show you this side-by-side of the same song at different parts. The video on the left shows the first star power activation of Blood and Thunder, which has 4 beats per measure, and the video on the right shows the same song during a part that has 11 beats per measure. The tempo is about the same, but you can see the video on the right has a much slower star power drain due to the extra beats found every measure. It wouldn't be Neversoft without weirdness affecting star power as well. If you look at this side-by-side from Assassin by Muse, you can see that star power is activated at the same time at the same note. Despite these two sections of the song being extremely similar, the star power on the left finishes well before the one on the right. And why is that? It's because the chart data isn't lined up correctly. During this section, the time signature changes from 4/4 to 6/4 and back to 4/4, and as we learned earlier, the star power drain changes depending on your time signature. Star power drain is handled by the game checking every frame to see how long a measure lasts at that point in time. It does so by looking at what the measure time variable is at that point in time. Measure time is calculated whenever the song's time reaches a new entry in the fretbar array as it's iterating through it. Measure time is the time difference between the current fretbar and the next multiplied by the numerator of the time signature. Normally this works fine, but in Assassin, the fretbar shows up at 52.600 seconds, but the 6/4 time signature change happens at exactly 52.601 seconds. I cannot say how Neversoft introduced this error, but it's there. Because of that tiny mismatch, the game calculates measure time using the old 4/4 numerator, so the very first beat of the 6/4 section drains as if it was still in 4/4. Once the second fretbar of the 6/4 section triggers a new calculation, the game is properly set to 6/4 and everything drains as expected. What this means is that for the very first beat of the 6/4 time section, it drains 3.125% of the star power meter instead of 2.083% like a normal 6/4 measure. And this is exactly why, in the previous side-by-side, the gauge on the left runs out faster even though both activations start on the same note. All games calculate a hidden base score for any song loaded. This score is what is used to determine how many stars you receive at the end of a song. The base score is calculated by determining what the score would be if you hit 100% of the notes and sustains with a one-time multiplier. If you've ever gone into the More Stats screen after beating a song and see the average multiplier or score scale value, this number is your score divided by the base score. On the PlayStation 2 console, the base score calculation is also affected by the drop ticks I mentioned earlier. As for earning stars, the number of stars received has evolved over the course of Guitar Hero's life. In the games before Guitar Hero Metallica, you'd get 5 stars when your score multiplier was equal to or above 2.8 times, 4 stars when your score was between 2 and 2.8 times, and 3 stars when you had a score lower than 2 times the base score. The fan site ScoreHero would extrapolate these values for games before World Tour so that getting 3.6 times the base score yields you 6 stars, 4.4 times the base score would yield 7, and so on. Starting with Guitar Hero Metallica, the game displays the 1, 2, and 3 star cutoffs to 0.33 times, 0.67 times, and 1 times the base score, respectively, in order to show star values on the in-game heads-up display. However, they're all for show, since the game will also slowly add stars to your meter as the song goes on. You can see this in songs with a long noteless intro such as 1. Even if you somehow manage to get a score below the base score, the game will still grant you 3 stars at the very end. Guitar Hero 5 first defined proper values for 1, 2, and 3 star cutoffs at 0.1 times, 0.65 times, and 0.9 times the base score, respectively. Then, in Warriors of Rock, when you could gain up to 20 stars through score chasing, the following 6 to 20 star cutoffs were added for playing in career or quick play with the powers active. A new feature starting with Guitar Hero World Tour was extended sustains. These are sustained notes that have other notes played on top of them while the first sustain is still active. You would need to keep the original note held down to keep getting the ticks while playing other notes. If a note was also a sustain, the game would not double up your tick rate, you'll instead only get the 50 points for hitting the extra note, and the sustain will just activate. There is with this new feature a major glitch that you can use to get extra points. If the notes played on top of the original sustain is also a sustain, you can purposefully drop the initial sustain before hitting the next one. Once that new sustain completes, you receive a point bonus. The amount of points you receive is the total value of the dropped sustain minus any ticks earned from the sustain you play. If the original sustain ends at the same time or before the end of the new sustain, the point bonus is the amount of ticks you earned before hitting the last extended note, multiplied by your current multiplier. While these points are small, if a song contains many of these extended sustains, this can add up to a lot. However, if the new sustain is shorter than the initial sustain and there are multiple sustains that end before the initial sustain ends, you get a massive bonus at the end of every note. This is really apparent at the end of Psychobilly Freakout in Smash Hits on bass. These sustains are fairly small, so you get the full value of the sustain, in this case 3600 points under star power, minus the ticks you earn from the active sustain. A big part of doing all this score research was because I initially wanted to add support for Neversoft Guitar Hero games to generic Mad Scientist's, aka GMS's, CHOpt program. CHOpt is a pathing optimizer and it currently doesn't support any Neversoft game. While doing research for this video, I attempted to add the functionality myself, as the program is open source. However, I ended up being a little bit in over my head, so I thought to reach out to GMS himself and present the research. He seemed pretty hyped about it and actually started adding the functionality to the program himself. Over the past few weeks, we've been testing the program to ensure that GH3 and its DLC, as well as Guitar Hero Aerosmith, all work on it. And on top of that, the program also supports custom charts. As of this writing, it only requires you to extract using Honeycomb and to make sure that it's not in the human-readable .q format. The CLI supports this by adding a -q command, and the GUI has a dedicated checkbox for this. Once you've extracted the song's PAK file, locate the mid.qb, and you can use it with CHOpt to generate a path usable in Guitar Hero 3 and Guitar Hero Aerosmith. Please find links to the newest CHOpt in the description down below.
I also want to give a shout out to Freg. For those that don't know, in addition to being a prolific Australian streamer in the rhythm game space, he also maintains two sites called RB Paths and FNF Paths that house all the paths for Rock Band and Fortnite Festival. With this new update to CHOpt, he's now also added GH Paths. This neat little website contains all of Guitar Hero 3's and Guitar Hero Aerosmith paths, including DLC, as generated by CHOpt. The site allows you to search for any song by name and look up the expert chart immediately. It also has integrations with ScoreHero, so you can see how the top scores compare to the potential optimal path. Please find a link to this website down in the description as well.
On top of that, I hope that this video as a whole was educational for you. If you liked it, please hit the like button and share with your friends. If you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. I have more videos on the way soon. Have a great day!